Hello everybody, my name is Mark Danson and I'm Professor of Environmental Remote Sensing at the University of Salford. And this is the first of three short videos that I'd like you to have a look at before our first face-to-face meeting in this module. So this is really just an introduction to the sessions that I'll do with you in the module GIS and remote sensing for wildlife conservation. So for about 30 years now, I've been using different types of satellite remote sensing data to study Earth surface processes. And my main focus has been on landscape and land cover mapping. And I've worked on a range of different problems in different environments, from monitoring agricultural crops to looking at the growth and change in forests, to grassland changes in range environments, to problems in upland areas as well. And about 15 or 16 years ago, I also started to work on some problems related to wildlife distributions, and in particular looking at the distribution of small mammals in grassland areas in Central Asia and Western China. And the main purpose of that research was to understand how a parasitic tapeworm called Echinococcus multilocularis is transmitted from small mammals via dogs and foxes to humans. And this parasite is extremely dangerous, causes death in 90% of infected people, and was highly endemic in these areas in Asia and Western China. And so one of the questions was, what are the landscapes in which these small mammals thrive? And so I worked on landscape and land cover mapping in relation to small mammal distributions to help understand the transmission cycle and the spatial distribution of risk for humans from this parasite. So I've worked in a range of different environments, and in this module we're going to focus on how we can use satellite data, like data from Landsat 9 that you see in the picture here, which was actually launched about 3 weeks ago. You might have seen it on the BBC. And this satellite is regularly orbiting the Earth and recording images of the Earth's surface. And we can use those data for a range of different applications, including wildlife conservation. So what I'd like to do mainly in this introductory video is just talk about the 5 sessions that you'll do with me. And on this slide you can see the main themes that we'll address. So the idea is that on the Monday or Tuesday before our Friday lecture session, I'll release some material that you need to have a look at before that session. And so this, as I said before, is one of 3 videos you need to look at before our first meeting. In our first meeting, the topic is Introduction to Environmental Remote Sensing. So by that stage, you'll have looked at this introductory video. You'll have seen a short second video about some of the basic principles of environmental remote sensing. And then in the session, we'll talk in detail a bit more about some of those concepts. And then we'll follow that up in the following week with a practical that starts to introduce the skills you'll need for the assessed part of this module. In the second session, we'll focus on satellite remote sensing. So how do we use satellite platforms to collect data, and focus on specific things like spatial, spectral, and temporal resolution. And then that will be followed by a practical where we use a piece of software called ERDAS Imagine that you can use to analyze satellite data. The following week, we'll look at the different sorts of information that we can get from remotely sensed data. So including things about the presence and absence of features, thematic map data, and information about how quickly processes on the Earth's surface are changing. and then we'll do a practical on producing land cover maps from satellite data. The following week, the topic is mapping landscapes from remotely sensed data. So how do we go from a remotely sensed image to a land cover or a habitat map? And in the practical, you'll have a go at making your own landscape or land cover map of your chosen area. And then in the final theme, we'll finish off by talking a little bit about some of the challenges, or I've called it perils and pitfalls in image classification. And I'll introduce what you have to do for my part of the assessment in this module. And then in the final practical, you'll complete most of the hands-on practical work that you'll need to do in order to complete that practical work. So that's it by way of introduction. Move on now and look at the second video in on the Blackboard site. Make some notes and come armed with questions that you might have about the introductory to videos, and we can discuss those when we meet face to face. And then finally, there's a third video in which you'll see a selection of different remote sensing data, and attached to that is a series of questions that I'd like you to try and answer before the session, the next session when we meet. So hopefully you'll complete all three of those things, and we can make a start in discussing some of these themes when we meet later on. Okay, and thank you very much.